The envelope hit the kitchen counter at 7:42 on a Friday evening.
Claire, it's not that simple.
No warning, no conversation, no "we need to talk." Just a white envelope, placed down carefully, deliberately, like a business transaction. Claire was 7.5 months pregnant. Her husband of 6 years stood across the kitchen and said 3 words.
We were just finalizing the
Sign the
details, Claire.
papers. She opened
I
the
believe you mean
envelope.
my details, Patricia.
Divorce papers. His name at the top as petitioner, her name
Are
as
you sure this is the right
respondent.
email? Yes,
She
look
did
at
not
the date. This changes
scream, she
everything.
did not beg. She set the papers down, turned off the stove, and walked to the bedroom. But here is what Derek Calloway did not know. At that exact moment, the same Friday evening, he handed his pregnant wife divorce papers. Her grandmother had just passed away quietly in her sleep in Newport. And 2 days later, Claire received a phone call from an attorney named Gerald Harmon. $4.3 billion. All of it in her name. Derek had planned every detail of his exit. He had timed it perfectly. He had consulted lawyers. He had staged interventions. He had built an entire strategy around one assumption, that Claire Whitmore was someone who could be managed. He was wrong. And when the truth came out, every last piece of it, his mother called, his sister called, Derek himself called, not to apologize, to beg. This is the story of what happens when the wrong people underestimate the right woman. Stay with us. Lesson statement. Before we begin, remember this. The people who try hardest to define your worth are usually the ones most threatened by what you are actually worth. This story is proof. If this story moved you, if you have ever been underestimated, overlooked, or walked away from by someone who had no idea who they were leaving, drop a comment below and tell us. We read every single one. And if you believe someone in your life needs to hear this story today, share it with them. That one share might be exactly what they need. Like this video if Claire's strength resonated with you. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story like this one. New stories every week. Real, vulnerable, and made for women who know their own worth. We will see you in the next one.
The envelope hit the kitchen counter with a sound like a closing door. Not a slam, not a crash, just a soft, deliberate thud. The kind of sound that meant someone had thought very carefully about how to place something down. Claire Whitmore was standing at the stove. Her back was to the door. Her left hand held a wooden spoon, and her right hand rested on the curve of her belly. 7.5 months. The baby had been quiet all afternoon, which she appreciated. The evenings were when he liked to kick. She heard Derek's footsteps cross the hardwood floor. She recognized the rhythm of them. 6 years of marriage meant she knew the difference between his tired walk and his distracted walk and his I need to tell you something walk. This was something new. She stirred the oatmeal. She did not turn around. "You're home late," she said. No answer. The refrigerator hummed. The oatmeal bubbled once. Outside, a car passed on the street, headlights sweeping briefly across the kitchen window. She turned around. Derek stood on the other side of the kitchen island. He still had his work jacket on. His tie was loosened exactly 1 inch, the way he always loosened it on the drive home. He was looking at the envelope on the counter, not at her. "What is that?" she asked. "You know what it is," he said. She looked at the envelope. It was white, thick. Her name was typed on the front, not handwritten. Typed. She picked it up. Her fingers felt steady, which surprised her. She pulled out the papers inside and unfolded them. The words at the top were printed in clean, black letters. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Petitioner, Derek James Calloway. Respondent, Claire Ann Whitmore Calloway. The kitchen tilted, or perhaps she tilted. She put one hand on the edge of the counter. Under her palm, the granite was cold and smooth and absolutely real. The baby kicked once. Hard. Derek, she said. Her voice came out level. She was grateful for that. I am 7.5 months pregnant. I know, he said. With your child. With our child, he corrected. He was still not looking at her. That doesn't change anything. She looked at his face. She looked at it the way you look at something familiar that has suddenly become unrecognizable. 6 years. She had spent 6 years learning the particular way he tilted his head when he was thinking, the small sound he made when his coffee was too hot, the way he reached for her hands in the dark. She looked at him now, and none of that seemed like information about this person. Is there someone else? She asked. Silence. In that silence, she found her answer. She looked back down at the papers. She read the first paragraph carefully, then the second. The language was clean and legal and efficient, the kind of language that turned a human life into a set of transferable assets. She set the papers back on the counter. She turned back to the stove. She turned off the burner under the oatmeal. I'm all right, she said. Derek blinked. All right? All right. She picked up the papers and walked to the bedroom. She closed the door behind her. Not a slam, just a close. She sat on the edge of the bed. The room was the same room it had always been. Cream walls, gray curtains, the photograph of Newport on the nightstand, the one she had taken on a trip to visit her grandmother 3 summers ago. Everything was exactly where it had always been. She put her hand on her stomach. The baby was quiet again. She sat there for a long time. She did not cry. She was not ready to cry yet. She was still in the part where the information was arriving, and her mind was working to find somewhere to put it. She checked her phone. Nothing from Derek. No knock on the door. No footsteps in the hallway. She checked it again. Still nothing. She set it face down on the nightstand and looked at the ceiling. God, she thought. I have known for weeks. The signs were all there, and I kept finding explanations for each one and stacking those explanations up like a wall between me and the truth. She had not been foolish. She had been hopeful. She understood now that those were not the same thing, but the distinction did not make her feel any better. She picked up her phone one more time. There was a text from an unknown number. She almost ignored it. Then she read it. Miss Whitmore, this is Gerald Harmon, attorney for Vivian Whitmore. Please call me at your earliest convenience. This matter is urgent. She read it twice. Then she sat, very still, for a moment. Vivian. Her grandmother. The woman who had called her every Sunday morning since she was 12 years old. The woman who made biscuits from scratch and kept a photograph of Claire at age 10 on her mantelpiece and once told her, with absolute certainty, "You are the best thing that has ever happened to this family." An attorney. Urgent. Something cold moved through her. She called the number back. The phone rang twice. A man answered. Gerald Harmon speaking. This is Claire Whitmore, she said. You texted me. A pause. Careful. Yes. Miss Whitmore, thank you for calling back so quickly. I'm afraid I have difficult news. Is there somewhere you can sit down? She was already sitting down. Tell me, she said, your grandmother, Vivian Whitmore, passed away last Friday evening, peacefully, in her sleep. She had been in declining health for several months, as I believe you know. Friday. Last Friday. The same evening, Derek had placed those papers on the counter. She said nothing for a long moment. Miss Whitmore? I'm here, she said. Please continue. Vivian left very specific instructions regarding her estate. She wanted you notified as soon as possible. I would like to meet with you tomorrow if you're able. There are matters of significant importance that require your attention. What kind of matters? she asked. Another careful pause. The kind that are better discussed in person, he said. She looked at the bedroom door. On the other side of it, Derek was somewhere in the house. She did not hear him. The house was very quiet. Tomorrow morning, she said, 9 o'clock. I'll send you the address, Gerald Harmon said. She ended the call. She set the phone down. Friday. Derek had handed her divorce papers on the same evening her grandmother died. She did not know yet what that meant, but she knew it meant something. I'm not imagining this, she thought. I know what I'm feeling right now, and I know it is real. She lay down on top of the covers without changing her clothes. She rested her hands on her stomach. The baby shifted slowly, settling. I don't know what is happening yet, she told him, but I will figure it out. I promise you that. She did not sleep for a long time. When she finally did, she dreamed of Newport. The smell of salt air and the sound of water, and the way her grandmother's laugh carried across the back porch like something permanent. Gerald Harmon's office was on the 14th floor of a building downtown. The waiting room was quiet. Cream carpet, dark wood, 2 chairs that looked like they had been chosen by someone who understood that people sat in them during the worst moments of their lives and should not be made to feel uncomfortable. Claire arrived at 8:55. She had not told Derek where she was going. He had slept on the couch. She had heard him leave the house at 7:30, the front door closing with that same careful, deliberate sound as the envelope the night before. Gerald Harmon met her in the waiting room. He was a man of about 55, with silver at his temples and a face that had the particular quality of someone who had learned to keep his reactions from showing in his eyes while keeping his kindness visible in everything else. He looked at her stomach, then at her face, then he shook her hand. Thank you for coming, Miss Whitmore, he said. I'm very sorry for your loss. Thank you, she said. Please just tell me everything. They sat in his office. He brought her water without asking. Then he sat down across from her and opened a folder. Your grandmother was a private woman, he began. I have been her attorney for 22 years. In that time, I learned that she told people precisely what she wanted them to know and nothing more. This was not secretiveness, it was strategy. That sounds like her, Claire said. Vivian Whitmore was the founding shareholder and honorary chairperson of Whitmore Enterprises, Gerald continued. Whitmore Enterprises is a diversified holding company with interests in commercial real estate, investment portfolio management, and a portfolio of luxury hospitality properties currently operating in 17 countries. He paused. He turned the folder around and pushed it across the desk. Total audited assets, as of the third quarter of last year, were $4.3 billion. The number sat in the air of the office like a physical object. Claire looked at the page. The number was printed there in plain black type, $4.3 billion. She had known her grandmother was comfortable. She had known there was family money, had known about the house in Newport and the investments and the quiet, unhurried way Vivian moved through the world. But she had not known this. She had not known any of this. In her will, updated 8 months ago, Gerald said, Vivian transferred all voting rights and controlling interest in Whitmore Enterprises to her sole surviving grandchild. He looked at Claire. That is you, 73% of the company. Everything else is distributed among a small number of charitable foundations she supported during her lifetime. Claire set the paper down. She never told me, she said. She had reasons for that, Gerald said carefully. She wanted to be certain the people in your life were there for you and not for what you might one day represent. Claire was quiet. She thought about Derek, about the way he had placed the envelope on the counter, about the date on the divorce papers, about the phone call Gerald had referenced, which she had not yet mentioned. Who else knew about this will, she asked. Gerald met her eyes. That is the question I have been waiting for you to ask. He opened a second folder. Our office received a call on Thursday afternoon, the day before Vivian passed. The caller identified himself as a legal representative for the Calloway family. He requested information regarding the status of Vivian Whitmore's estate and any existing will. Thursday, one day before the divorce papers. What did you tell him? She asked. We told him nothing, Gerald said. Attorney-client privilege. But the call was logged, and the timing is notable. Claire sat very still. The office was quiet. Somewhere in the building a phone was ringing, distant and muffled. I'm not crazy, she thought. I know exactly what I'm looking at. She had gone over it on the drive here. She had organized the pieces like tiles on a floor, laying them edge to edge until the pattern became visible. Derek had known Vivian was dying. Someone had told him, or he had found out. He had investigated the estate. He had learned about the will. And on the night his source confirmed the inheritance was real, he had handed her divorce papers. Because if they divorced before the inheritance was officially transferred, the prenuptial agreement would govern the settlement. The prenuptial agreement that his lawyer had drafted. The one that had seemed so reasonable at the time. He had wanted to be out before she became worth anything. I need to know the timeline for formal transfer of the inheritance, Claire said. Her voice was very steady. And I need to understand what happens if I am in active divorce proceedings when it occurs. Gerald nodded slowly. Those are the right questions. And you should know that your position is considerably stronger than your husband's attorney may have led him to believe. She almost smiled. He hasn't told me anything. He hasn't said a word since he handed me those papers. Then he is either very confident, Gerald said, or very foolish. She thought about Derek, his careful suits, his strategic silences, his way of planning 3 moves ahead. He is very confident, she said. He just underestimated who he was dealing with. She left Gerald's office at 11 o'clock. She stood on the sidewalk outside the building for a moment, the morning air cool against her face, traffic moving steadily past. She called Margot. Claire, are you okay? Is the baby okay? We're both fine, Claire said. Margot, I need you to help me find the best attorney in the city. Not divorce, corporate asset law. Someone who deals with inheritance disputes and contested transfers. Margot was quiet for 2 seconds. What happened? I'll explain everything tonight. Right now, just help me find a name. Okay, Margot said. No argument. No 20 questions. That was what 14 years of friendship looked like. I'll call you back in an hour. One more thing, Claire said. Don't tell anyone we spoke. Not yet. She ended the call. She stood on the sidewalk with one hand on her stomach. I deserve to know this before anyone else, she thought. She was my grandmother, and she deserved to have someone she loved find out in a way that wasn't managed and timed by people with their own agenda. She took a breath. Then she walked to her car. Claire did not go straight home. She drove for 20 minutes without a destination. She ended up in the parking lot of a grocery store 3 miles from her house. She turned off the engine. She sat. The windows fogged slightly at the edges. She did not move to fix them. She let herself think. 6 years. She was going to go through 6 years, and she was going to look at every piece of it with clear eyes this time, without the protective layer of hope she had always spread over the difficult parts. Year 1. She met Derek at a charity event, a benefit auction for a children's hospital, the kind of gathering where everyone wore nice shoes and wrote checks, and circulated with champagne. She had been there because she believed in the cause. He had been there because his firm sent people to these events for the networking. He had found her in the corner, by the dessert table, reading the placard on a painting that was up for auction. He had stood beside her and said, "You're actually reading it." She had looked at him. "It's good work. Someone made it." The least I can do is understand what it is." He had smiled, and she had noticed that he was handsome in an uncomplicated way, the kind of handsome that didn't ask anything from you. They had talked for 2 hours. He had called the next day. He had been attentive and curious and present in a way she wasn't used to. She had thought, at the time, that she was the lucky one. What she had not examined carefully enough was the question of why he had chosen her, out of a room full of people, out of every conversation he could have had. Sitting in the parking lot, she examined it now. She had told him about Vivian that first night. She had mentioned her grandmother warmly, the way you mention someone you love when you feel comfortable. She had described the house in Newport, the trips there, the closeness. He had asked very specific follow-up questions. She had not thought anything of it at the time. Year 3, the wedding, Vivian had not been well enough to travel, but she had called the night before. Her voice had been the same as always, certain and warm and direct. "Are you sure, my darling?" "I'm sure, grandmother. You know you are worth everything, not because of anything he gives you, because of who you are." At the time, Claire had heard it as the warm reassurance of an old woman who loved her. Now she understood it was a warning wrapped in love. Vivian had been trying to tell her something without saying it plainly, because Vivian did not say things plainly unless she had no other choice. Year 4, Derek had started asking about money. Not directly. He was too careful for direct. He would mention opportunities. He would describe investments in the way someone describes a meal they hope you'll suggest going to get. "My colleague is involved in a development project downtown. The early investors are seeing excellent returns. I was thinking about whether it made sense for us to put some of our savings in." Our savings? As if the lines between his money and hers had already dissolved without a formal conversation. She had contributed $40,000 to that project. She had never seen any return. Derek had shrugged and said these things happened sometimes and moved on. She had absorbed the loss and told herself it wasn't about the money. Year 5. She had found a name in his phone. Sophia Reeves. She had asked about it. Derek had looked at her with those patient, slightly hurt eyes. "She's a colleague, Claire. Do you really want to do this?" She had backed down. She had apologized for asking. She sat in the parking lot and pressed her palm flat against her sternum. God, I was so stupid. The signs were all there, every single one. She was not being fair to herself, and she knew it. She had not been stupid. She had been in a marriage, and she had wanted it to work, and she had made the kinds of adjustments and compromises that people make when they want things to work. But she had also ignored things she should not have ignored. And now she was 7.5 months pregnant and sitting in a grocery store parking lot, processing the fact that her husband had tried to divorce her before she could find out she was worth $4.3 billion. She started the car. When she got home, Patricia Calloway was sitting on her couch. Not just Patricia. Patricia and Renee, mother and daughter, both in their good clothes, coffee cups already on the table, as if they had been there long enough to feel at home. Derek stood near the fireplace. He had the look of someone who had arranged something and was watching to see if it would work. "We thought we should talk," Patricia said. Her voice was warm and smooth. It was always warm and smooth. Claire had spent 3 years trying to find something genuine behind it. "About the arrangements," Renee added. Claire looked at all 3 of them. She looked at the coffee cups. She looked at the careful way they had arranged themselves. Patricia centered on the sofa, with Renee slightly to the side, Derek near the fireplace, where he could look supportive without being close enough to touch her. They all knew. The certainty arrived without drama. It simply settled. They all knew about Vivian's will. They had known before she did. This entire scene had been staged specifically to make sure she signed the divorce papers before she had time to understand what she was signing away. "Sit down," Patricia said, gesturing to the armchair across from her. Claire sat down. She set her bag on the floor. She folded her hands in her lap. "We understand this is a difficult time," Patricia began. "Particularly with the pregnancy," Renee said. "Which is exactly why we want to make sure everything is handled as smoothly as possible," Patricia continued. "For your sake and for the baby's sake." Claire looked at Derek. He was watching her the way you watch a door you are not sure is locked. "What specifically are you proposing?" Claire asked. Patricia smiled. It was the smile of someone who had prepared for this conversation carefully. "A clean settlement, fair to both parties. Derek has already arranged for a very comfortable apartment close to a wonderful hospital, so you'll have everything you need during the final weeks of your pregnancy." "He thought of everything," Renee said. "He really did," Claire said. Her voice gave nothing away. She had not known she could do that. She was discovering new things about herself today. "The financial terms are straightforward," Patricia said. "The prenuptial agreement covers the basics, and Derek is prepared to be generous beyond what it requires." "Generous?" She almost laughed. He was prepared to be generous with the money he currently had before the $4.3 billion was legally transferred to her name. "I'd like to have my attorney review everything," Claire said pleasantly. Patricia's smile didn't waver. "Of course, that's very sensible. Then I'll be in touch through her," Claire said. She stood up. "I appreciate you all coming by." She walked to the front door and opened it. Patricia's smile finally shifted, just a fraction. "Claire, I hope you understand that we're trying to make this easier." "I understand perfectly," Claire said. "Good night, Patricia." After they left, after Derek retreated to the spare room without a word, Claire stood in the kitchen, in the dark, for a long time. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, the street was quiet. She was not angry yet. The anger was coming. She could feel it forming somewhere deep, like weather, building beyond the horizon. But right now, she was still in the cold, clear place of understanding. "He never loved me," she thought. "He loved the version of me that might one day be connected to something valuable. He loved the idea of what I could become for him." She had been a long-term investment strategy. She had been a position he was holding until the right moment to cash out. She picked up her phone and called Margot back. "Did you find a name?" she asked. "Victoria Marsh," Margot said. "Everyone calls her the best in the city. She does not lose." "Get me a meeting with her," Claire said. "Tomorrow, if possible." Victoria Marsh had an office that looked like it belonged to someone who had stopped trying to impress people and started simply being excellent. No unnecessary furniture, no artwork chosen to signal success. Just clean lines and good light and a desk covered in organized stacks of paper. She was 50 years old, with sharp gray eyes and dark hair pulled back simply. She shook Claire's hand with the firmness of someone who had learned that how you greeted people told them everything they needed to know about whether you were serious. "Tell me everything," she said. "Don't edit. Don't decide what's relevant. Tell me all of it." Claire told her all of it. The divorce papers on Friday evening, the call from Gerald Harmon on Saturday morning, the $4.3 billion. The Thursday phone call from someone representing the Calloway family to Gerald's office. The staged intervention with Patricia and Renee on her couch. Victoria listened without interrupting. When Claire finished, she was quiet for a moment. "The email," she said. "The one you mentioned to me on the phone, from your contact." "I don't have it yet," Claire said. "Someone reached out to me last night. She says she has evidence. We're meeting this afternoon." Victoria tapped one finger on her desk. Once, twice. If the email contains what you believe it contains, she said, we are not dealing with a simple, contested divorce. We are dealing with evidence of intent to defraud in a marital proceeding. That changes the landscape significantly. How significantly? The prenuptial agreement was signed in good faith. If we can demonstrate that one party entered into and then sought to dissolve the marriage specifically to avoid legitimate marital inheritance rights, the agreement loses its protective value for that party. She met Claire's eyes. In plain language, if Derek timed this divorce specifically because he learned about the will, and we can prove it, he gets nothing beyond what he came in with. Claire let that settle. He thought he was being clever, she said. Most people who try to do something like this think they are being clever, Victoria said. They rarely account for the other person deciding to be cleverer. That afternoon, Claire met Sophia Reeves at a coffee shop 6 blocks from the Whitmore Enterprises building, which Claire had looked up but not yet visited. Sophia was younger than Claire had imagined, 28. Dark hair, shadows under her eyes. She was sitting with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup, the way you hold something when you need an anchor. She looked up when Claire came in. Something moved across her face. It was not guilt exactly. It was closer to the look of someone who had realized they had been used and was still processing the dimensions of that. "Thank you for coming," Sophia said. Claire sat down across from her. She ordered nothing. She folded her hands on the table. "Say what you came to say," she said. Not unkindly, just directly. Sophia took a breath. "Derek told me the marriage had been over for years, that you stayed together for appearances, that the pregnancy was a mistake that happened when you two had a weak moment, not because there was anything real left." Claire did not flinch. She had expected something like this. "He told me he was filing for divorce because he had finally found the courage to do what he should have done years ago," Sophia continued. She said this with the tone of someone reciting something they had since recognized as a script. "And now?" Claire said. "Now I found something I wasn't supposed to find." Sophia set her phone on the table and turned it around. It was a screenshot of an email. Claire read it. The email was from Derek, addressed to Patricia. It was dated 5 weeks earlier. "Source confirms VW unlikely to survive past year end. Will overwhelmingly favors Claire. We need to move before she is notified. Prenuptial protects us if dissolution is filed prior to formal inheritance transfer. Spoke with Harris. Timeline is viable if we act within the next 30 days. She read it twice. Then she looked up. "He left his email open on a shared computer at work," Sophia said quietly. "I wasn't looking for it. I was pulling up a project file. Did you save this?" "I sent it to my own account the same day I found it. I didn't know what to do with it." She paused. "I didn't know I was part of a plan." Claire looked at her for a long moment. At 28 years old, Sophia Reeves looked like someone who had arrived somewhere she had not expected to arrive. There was no way to know yet what she would do with that. "Will you speak to my attorney?" Claire asked. Sophia was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded. "Yes," she said. "I will." That evening, Claire sat in her kitchen after dark again. But this time it was different. This time she had 3 things she had not had 24 hours ago. She had Gerald Harmon and the documentation of the Thursday phone call. She had Sophia Reeves and the email. And she had Victoria Marsh, who did not lose. She also had Patricia's next move, which arrived at 10 o'clock that night through a text from Margot. "Claire, Patricia has been calling people, our mutual friends. She's telling them you're emotionally unstable, that you're not coping with the pregnancy well, that Derek has concerns." Claire read the text. She set the phone down. She picked it up. She forwarded the text to Victoria. Then she typed back to Margot. "Log everything, every call. Every person, every date. I want a record. She was not going to collapse. She was not going to give Patricia Calloway the unstable woman she was trying to create in people's minds. But she was going to pay attention, and she was going to document. Starting over feels frightening, she thought. But I know one thing clearly now. Staying would have been impossible. The Whitmore Enterprises building was on the east side of downtown. 42 floors of glass and steel, a lobby with a marble floor and a reception desk staffed by a young man who looked up when Claire walked in and immediately stood up straighter. She had called Nathan Cross the previous day, brief and direct. "I'm Claire Whitmore," she had said. "My grandmother left me out the company. I'd like to come in." "I've been waiting for your call," Nathan had replied. "Name the day." She had named it. He had been ready. Nathan Cross was 40 years old and had the manner of someone who was very good at their job and had reached a point in their career where they no longer needed to perform being good at it. He shook her hand in the lobby, looked at her without looking at her stomach first, and said, "Welcome to Whitmore Enterprises, Miss Whitmore." "Claire," she said. "Claire," he agreed. He took her through the building floor by floor, not rushing, not performing. He explained the structure of the operation, the way a person explains something to someone they believe is capable of understanding it. Whitmore Enterprises had 4 divisions: commercial real estate holdings across 11 major American cities, a managed investment portfolio, an international hospitality group with 31 hotels across 17 countries, and a private equity arm that Vivian had built quietly over 20 years, backing small companies she believed in before anyone else did. She had good instincts, Nathan said. She had excellent instincts, Claire said, about everything. On the 3rd floor, he showed her the executive suite. Vivian's office was at the end of a long hallway, behind a dark wood door. Inside, it was exactly what Claire would have expected. No clutter, good light, a desk with clean lines and a bookshelf filled with actual books, the spines worn. And on the windowsill, in a small silver frame, a photograph of Claire at age 10. Taller than most, toe braids. Squinting into the sun on the Newport dock, Claire stood in front of it for a moment. She did not cry. She made a decision, standing in that office, looking at that photograph. "I am going to learn this," she thought. "I am going to learn everything about this company, and I am going to do right by what she built, and I am going to do it because she believed I could, not because I need to prove anything to anyone else." She spent 3 hours with Nathan that first day. She asked questions continuously. He answered them without impatience. By the end, he looked at her with something she recognized as reassessment. "Vivian said you would catch on quickly," he said. "Did she say anything else?" He thought for a moment. "She said the people in your life had underestimated you for a long time, and that this would ultimately work in your favor." Claire looked out the window at the city below. She was right, she said. That same week, Victoria Marsh filed a formal response to Derek's dissolution petition. The response cited evidence of procedural misconduct and requested a full financial disclosure review. It also formally entered the email from Derek to Patricia into the record. Derek's attorney, a man named Harris, who Claire had only heard about through the email, apparently spent 2 days in emergency consultation with his client after that. Victoria called Claire on a Thursday evening. "They've gone quiet," she said. "That usually means they're reassessing. What are they likely to do? Stall. Try to discredit the email. Try to minimize the timeline evidence. Possibly try to contact Sophia Reeves and discourage her from cooperating." Can they do that? "They can try," Victoria said, with a tone that suggested she was looking forward to it if they did. Meanwhile, Patricia's campaign continued. The word unstable had migrated from phone calls to a vague but pointed post on Renee's social media. Something about women who couldn't accept change. Something about moving forward with grace. Claire read it on a Tuesday morning while eating breakfast. She felt the anger then, not the cold, clear anger of recognition, which had served her well so far. Something hotter. She had married into this family. She had been polite to Patricia at every gathering for 6 years, had sent birthday gifts, and remembered the names of cousins and nieces, and had made herself smaller in a dozen ways she hadn't fully acknowledged at the time, and Patricia had been using that time to plan. She is not going to rewrite this story, Claire thought. She is not going to make me the difficult one. I know what I saw, I know what happened, and every person who matters is going to know it too. She called Nathan. I want to start coming in every morning, she said. 9 to 3, before the doctor says I need to rest. I'll have the briefing materials ready, he said. And Nathan, she added, I want to meet everyone on the senior team this week. I want them to know who I am before they hear it somewhere else. Already arranged, he said. She almost smiled. By the end of the second week, Claire had a rhythm. She arrived at Whitmore Enterprises at 9. She spent the first hour reading overnight reports, the second hour in meetings with Nathan or individual division heads, the third hour alone, reading contracts or historical records or the notes Vivian had kept in a series of green leather journals that Nathan had placed on her desk without comment. She read the journals carefully. Vivian wrote the way she spoke, directly, with occasional dry humor, with a long view of things. She had been building Whitmore Enterprises for 40 years. She had made decisions that looked wrong for a decade before they proved right. She had partnered with people who turned out badly and learned from it and moved on without bitterness. There was a passage from 7 years ago that Claire read 3 times. I have been thinking about what I am leaving behind, not the assets. Those are just math. I am thinking about whether I have left anything that matters. I think I have. Her name is Claire, and she does not know yet who she is, but she will. I have tried to leave her with enough time and enough freedom to figure it out without the wrong people making her doubt herself. Claire closed the journal. She sat with that for a moment. Then she put the journal carefully back on the shelf and went back to work. At home, the house felt different now. Not empty, cleaned out. There is a difference between a space that is lonely and a space that has been relieved of something that was wrong for it. She had started cooking properly again. Real meals, not the distracted eating of the weeks before. She made soup and bread and sat at the kitchen table and ate slowly and thought about things in an organized way. In the evenings, she talked to the baby, not worrying, the way she had sometimes in the first weeks after the papers. Planning. She told him about Vivian and Newport and the biscuits. She told him about the company and the journals and the photograph on the windowsill. She told him the things she wanted him to know about where he came from. You come from people who built things, she told him. That is what you have from your grandmother's side. You come from someone who figured out who she was and what she was capable of. That is also what you have from me. Margot came over on a Wednesday with dinner and a bottle of sparkling water with a bow on it, which made Claire laugh for the first time in what felt like weeks. The bow is because I couldn't bring wine, Margot said, dropping onto the couch. How are you, really? Better, Claire said. Actually better. The company? Complicated and fascinating and enormous. I feel like I'm standing in front of a very large painting, and I can only see one corner at a time, but the corner is beautiful. Margot studied her. You know what you look like right now? What? Yourself, Margot said. You look like yourself. I don't think you've looked like yourself in 3 years. Claire thought about that later, after Margot left. She stood in the bathroom, brushing her teeth, and looked at her reflection. 7.5 months pregnant, dark circles, hair she hadn't had cut in 2 months. But Margot was right. Something had come back into her face. Something she hadn't realized was missing. The next morning, Nathan came to her office with a folder. "There is something you should know," he said. He did not sit down, which meant it was something that required standing. She set down her coffee. "Tell me." Derek Calloway's attorney, Harris, contacted 2 of our board members directly this week. He represented himself as acting on behalf of a significant stakeholder and requested a meeting to discuss the leadership transition. "He has no standing to do that," Claire said. "No," Nathan agreed. "He does not." Was he told that? He was told that by both board members, who then called me. Claire nodded slowly. "They're trying to create doubt about my position before it's fully established. If they can get even one board member to hesitate, it gives them something to work with in court." "That is my read as well," Nathan said. "Call a board meeting," she said. "This week. I want to address them directly." He nodded. He started to leave. "Nathan," she said. He turned. "She was lucky to have you here," Claire said. "And so am I." He was quiet for a moment. "She would want me to tell you that the luck ran the other way," he said. Then he left. Claire looked back at her desk, at the folder of reports, at the photograph on the windowsill. She picked up her pen. She went back to work. It hit her on a Tuesday night, 3 weeks after the divorce papers. She had been doing well. She had been doing well consciously and consistently, putting one foot in front of the other with focus and intention. And then on a Tuesday night at 11 o'clock, she lay down in the bed she had shared with Derek for 6 years, and something gave way. Not dramatically. There was no falling apart, no moment of theatrical grief. It was quieter than that, just a sudden and total awareness of the weight of everything. She was 32 years old. She was going to have a baby alone. Her grandmother was gone. She was running a $4.3 billion company while her body grew another human being, and her marriage dissolved in a courtroom. And somewhere in the city, the man who had chosen to do this to her was sleeping peacefully in his mother's guest room, probably entirely certain that everything was still going to work out his way. She lay on her back and stared at the ceiling. The baby moved, a slow, rolling shift that felt like the tide coming in. "I know," she said softly. She thought about calling Margot. She looked at the clock. It was 11:23. She set the phone back down. She thought about what she was afraid of. Not the money. The money was real, but it was also abstract in a way that didn't reach her in the chest. She was afraid of being wrong again. She was afraid that some part of her judgment was permanently compromised by 6 years of trusting someone she shouldn't have, and that she would carry that mistrust into everything, including this company, including her son, including whatever her life looked like in 5 years. She was afraid that the version of herself she was becoming, clear-eyed, focused, unafraid to sit at the head of a boardroom table, was a performance, that somewhere under it she was still the woman who had kept a wooden spoon in her hand and waited for her husband to say hello. The hardest part is admitting that I knew. I knew something was wrong for a long time, and I stayed because leaving felt like giving up on the person I thought he was. She got up. It was 11:31. She went to the kitchen, not turning on the overhead light, just the small light over the stove. She filled a glass of water. She stood at the counter and drank it. Then she got on her hands and knees and started reorganizing the cabinet under the sink. It made no sense. She was 7.5 months pregnant, but her hands needed something to do, and her mind needed something to focus on, and the cabinet under the sink had been disordered for months. She sorted cleaning supplies by type. She threw away 3 things that were empty. She wiped down the shelf with a damp cloth. Then she sat on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet and the baby doing slow somersaults, and thought, "This is the hardest it is going to be, right here, this exact moment." She knew that wasn't strictly true. Labor would be harder. Single parenthood at 3 in the morning would be harder. There were going to be hard things she couldn't even see yet. But this particular kind of hard, the one where you are alone and scared, and you have just lost the story you were living in and haven't found the next one yet, this was the peak of this specific mountain, and she was sitting on the kitchen floor at midnight, which meant she was still there, still in it, still keeping herself company through the worst of it. She picked up her phone. She called Margot. It rang 4 times. "Claire?" Margot's voice was thick with sleep, but fully awake within a second. That was the thing about people who really loved you. They came awake fast when it was you. "I'm okay," Claire said immediately. "I just needed to hear someone's voice." A pause, then, "I'll be there in 15 minutes. "Margot, it's midnight." 14 minutes, Margot said. "I'm already putting on shoes." She arrived with 2 blankets, a container of leftover pasta, and the energy of someone who treated showing up for their friend as a matter of personal honor. She found Claire still on the kitchen floor and sat down next to her without comment. They ate pasta on the kitchen floor at midnight. Claire cried, not the deep, wrenching kind, just the kind that comes when someone sits next to you and you finally feel safe enough to let your shoulders down. "He's going to miss everything," Margot said quietly at some point. "He thinks he's winning something right now, but he's going to miss all of it." "I know," Claire said. "Your grandmother knew," Margot said. "She saw you. She always saw you, even when other people didn't bother to look." Claire leaned her head back against the cabinet. Somewhere along the way, she thought, I became invisible to the person who was supposed to see me most, but Vivian always looked. She always looked straight up at me. "I'm going to be a good mother," Claire said. It was not a question, it was not a wish. It was a statement of the most important intention she had ever made. "The best," Margot said simply. They sat there for a while longer. The kitchen was quiet. The small light over the stove made everything amber and warm. When Margot finally left, at 2 in the morning, Claire went back to bed and slept deeply for the first time in weeks. The board meeting was on a Wednesday morning. 12 people sat around the long table in the main conference room on the 38th floor. The city was visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows, brilliant and clear in the winter light. Claire arrived 2 minutes early. She set a glass of water on the table in front of her chair. She did not sit down immediately. She stood and looked out the window for a moment. Then she sat down, and she looked around the table. "Thank you for coming on short notice." "And it," she said. "I'll be direct, because I think that is what most of you would prefer." A few small nods. "My grandmother built this company over 40 years. I did not grow up in the business. I came to it 6 days ago. I have a great deal to learn, and I am not pretending otherwise." She paused. "But I am not a placeholder. I am not a name on a document waiting to be transitioned out. I am here because my grandmother believed I was the right person to continue what she started. I intend to take that seriously." She looked at the man on her left, the head of the real estate division. Then the woman on her right, who managed the investment portfolio. "I am going to ask each of you for a great deal of patience in the coming months," she said. "I am also going to ask for your honesty. If something is not working, tell me. If you disagree with the direction I want to take, tell me. I would rather know than not know. She paused one more time. I will not always make the right decision, but I will always make an informed one. That is the commitment I can make to you today. The room was quiet. Then Nathan, who was sitting 2 seats down, said simply, "That's all we need." Afterward, walking back to Vivian's office, her office now, she passed the photograph on the windowsill. She paused. She picked it up. The girl in the photograph was squinting into the sun, slightly windblown, entirely unaware of what was coming in 22 years. She set it back down, carefully. That afternoon, she signed off on 3 pending contracts that Nathan had flagged as straightforward. She made 2 phone calls to division heads she hadn't met yet. She read through the summary of a potential expansion project in Southeast Asia that Vivian had been considering. At the bottom of the summary, in Vivian's own handwriting, was a single line: "Waiting for the right moment, waiting for the right person." Claire sat with that. Then she wrote a note to Nathan. "Let's talk about the Southeast Asia project this week." At home that evening, she called the baby James, not officially yet, but in her mind, in her nighttime conversations with him, that was his name. "James," she said, "I went to a board meeting today, 12 people in very good suits, and I sat at the head of the table and I told them the truth and they listened." He moved. A solid, affirming kick. "Good," she said. "I thought so too." She was eating properly now, sleeping properly. Her doctor, Ann Purcell, told her at her weekly appointment that the baby was in perfect position and growing exactly as he should. "You seem steadier," Dr. Purcell said, with the particular observation of someone who had been watching her for months. "I feel steadier," Claire said. "That matters," the doctor said. "What's changed?" Claire thought about it. "I stopped waiting for things to become clear on their own. I started making them clear." Dr. Purcell smiled. "Good," she said. "Keep doing that." The news about the inheritance was still contained. Gerald Harmon had helped her understand the timeline. The formal legal transfer had been completed. But the public documentation process, the filing, the official record, had not yet been published. That would happen within the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks in which Derek and his attorney were still operating under the assumption that they were in a strong position. Victoria called one afternoon. Her voice had the particular quality of someone about to deliver good news carefully. "Harris submitted a formal motion to expedite the divorce proceedings," she said. "He cited your pregnancy as a reason to move quickly. He is arguing that a resolution before the birth would be in the best interest of the child. He's trying to close this before the inheritance information becomes public record," Claire said. "Yes," Victoria said. "And here is what I told him. We are prepared to proceed on our timeline, and that our timeline involves a complete disclosure of all relevant financial information, including assets acquired or anticipated within the marital period." Silence on the line. "He went quiet," Victoria said, with quiet satisfaction. "Exactly as I expected." Claire sat in Vivian's chair and looked out at the city. "I am not the woman who sat in that parking lot 2 weeks ago trying to figure out what hit her," she thought. "I am not that woman anymore. I was never just that woman. I was always also this one. It just took losing the wrong things to find the right self." The formal documentation was published on a Thursday. Claire was in a meeting with the head of the hospitality division when Nathan knocked and came in with a particular look on his face. He didn't interrupt. He simply placed a single piece of paper on the desk in front of her, face down, and left. She finished the meeting. She thanked the division head. She waited until the room was empty. Then she turned the paper over. It was a printout of the public filing. Her name, the company name, the asset figures, all of it, now a matter of public record. She folded the paper and put it in her desk drawer. Then she went back to work. Derek called at 4:30 that afternoon. She was in the car driving to her 3 o'clock appointment with Dr. Purcell, running slightly late. She looked at his name on the screen. She let it ring. He called again at 5. She was sitting in the waiting room of the doctor's office, looking at a poster about breastfeeding. She let it ring again. He texted at 5:15. "Claire, we need to talk. Please." She did not reply. Patricia's email arrived the following morning. It was 3 paragraphs long. It used the words misunderstanding and family and James's sake and mature resolution and we have always cared about you deeply. Claire forwarded it to Victoria without reading it a second time. Renee's message came on Saturday. It was shorter than Patricia's, which Claire had not expected. It said, "I know I don't deserve you to listen to me. I know the timing of this looks terrible, but I am genuinely sorry for what I posted and for not standing up to my mother and brother when I should have. I don't expect anything from you. I just needed to say it." Claire read Renee's message twice. She did not respond immediately, but she did not delete it. There was a difference between forgiving someone and finding their words credible. Renee's message had the texture of something real. That didn't mean anything needed to happen because of it, but she noted it. Derek's attorney submitted a formal motion 3 days after the filing went public. The motion requested withdrawal of the dissolution petition. Victoria called Claire the same afternoon. "They want to stay married," Victoria said. The dryness in her voice was so precise it was almost a science. Claire was quiet for a moment. "No," she said. "I assumed as much. I want to proceed with the dissolution, but on our terms, not the terms in the original petition." "I have been preparing for exactly that," Victoria said. "We will argue that the prenuptial was entered into under false pretenses, given the documented intent to exploit marital timing. We will argue that Derek's conduct constitutes constructive fraud in the dissolution proceeding, and we will present Sophia Reeves as a witness." "Will Sophia hold up?" "I spoke with her yesterday," Victoria said. "She is solid. She has nothing to gain from this, and she knows it. She is cooperating because she wants to do the right thing." The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning 6 weeks later. Claire arrived 10 minutes early. She wore a dark blue dress she had bought 2 days after James was born. When she had gone back to a weight that was still new and unfamiliar, and she had needed something that fit who she was right now, rather than who she had been before. She sat at the table next to Victoria. Derek sat across the room with Harris. He looked at her when she came in. She met his eyes briefly, and then looked at the folder on the table in front of her. He looked the same. That was the strange thing. She had expected him to look different, to look like what he had turned out to be. But he looked the same as always, neat, controlled. The tie loosened exactly 1 inch. The proceeding was shorter than she had expected. Courts in these matters move efficiently when the evidence is organized and both parties are prepared. The judge reviewed the financial disclosure. She reviewed the email. She reviewed the timeline documentation from Gerald Harmon's office. She heard from Sophia Reeves briefly, calmly, without drama. Then she reviewed the prenuptial agreement. The ruling came just after 11 in the morning. The prenuptial was upheld in structure, but its protective provisions were invalidated for the petitioning party, given the documented evidence of bad faith timing. Derek received the assets he had brought into the marriage and nothing more. No claim on Whitmore Enterprises, no portion of the inheritance, no future financial link to Claire beyond the child support schedule to be determined separately. Harris made one attempt to object. The judge looked at him with the expression of someone who had not said she was finished yet. and he sat back down. After, in the hallway, Derek came to her. She saw him approaching, and she did not walk away. She waited. He stopped a few feet from her. He looked at her for a moment without speaking. "You didn't have to take it this far," he said quietly. She looked at him. She was aware that she felt nothing in particular. Not anger, not satisfaction, something closer to the feeling of setting down something heavy you've been carrying for a long time. "I needed James to grow up knowing that his mother does not accept being treated this way," she said. "That wasn't about you. It was about him." She paused. "I hope things are better for you somewhere else," she said. And she meant it, not warmly. But she meant it. She turned and walked toward the exit. Margot was outside with James in the stroller, exactly as planned. The winter sun was sharp and thin. James was awake, looking up at the sky with the expression of someone who found the color blue personally astonishing. "How did it go?" Margot asked. "Done," Claire said. Margot handed her a coffee cup. "And then we celebrate." "What are we celebrating?" Margot looked at her. "The beginning of everything that comes next." 6 months later, James Vivian Whitmore was on the floor of his mother's office, investigating a red toy car with the intensity of a scientist examining something previously unknown to science. He was 4 months old. He had dark eyes, an excellent grip strength, and a habit of making a very specific sound when he was pleased with something, a sound that Claire had started unconsciously making herself when a meeting went well. The office smelled of coffee and the particular clean warmth of morning sun through high windows. On the windowsill, the photograph of the girl with 2 braids stood in its silver frame, now company to a second photograph. James at 2 weeks old, asleep in Claire's arms in the hospital bed, both of them exhausted and new and startlingly peaceful. Nathan knocked and came in. "Board approved the Southeast Asia expansion," he said. "Good," she said. "Tell the hospitality division to proceed with the initial site evaluation. I want a report in 3 weeks." He nodded. He looked at James, who had now moved on from the car and was examining the carpet with equal seriousness. "Vivian used to bring her dogs to the office," Nathan said. "I remember," Claire said. "The red one." "His name was Theodore," Nathan said. She talked to him during meetings when she thought no one was listening. Claire looked at James. "I talked to this one during meetings too. He makes a very good sounding board." Nathan smiled. He left the folder on the desk. He left. Claire leaned back in her chair and looked at the city through the glass. 6 months. In 6 months, she had restructured the quarterly reporting process, moved 2 underperforming assets, approved the Southeast Asia project, and met with every member of every senior team. She had made several decisions that Nathan had questioned, and one that he had told her was wrong. She had listened to him carefully on both counts. On the ones he questioned, she had explained her reasoning and held her position. On the one he said was wrong, she had changed course. This was what she was learning. Not the finance, though she was learning that too. The practice of knowing when you were right and when you weren't. The discipline of being able to tell the difference. She thought about Vivian. She thought about the journals on the shelf, which she had now read entirely. Twice. There was a passage near the end of the last journal, written about a year before Vivian died. "I have done what I could. The rest is hers. I have learned in 8 decades that the best thing you can give someone you love is the conditions for them to discover who they already are. The money is not the gift. The freedom the money represents is the gift. Freedom to choose, freedom to leave what needs leaving, freedom to become." Claire had read that passage on a Tuesday morning and had sat very still for a long time. She understood it now in a way she hadn't the first time she read it. Vivian had not left her $4.3 billion. She had left her the freedom she described. The money was the mechanism, The actual gift was the ability to walk away from what was wrong and toward what was right. She had used that gift. She was still using it. She picked up the photograph from the windowsill. The girl with the braids, squinting at the sun. "I think you'd recognize me," she said softly. "I think you'd know I'm still you." James made a sound from the floor. She looked down. He was looking up at her. "I know," she said. "It's time to go." That afternoon, she drove to Newport. She had not been back since before everything happened. She had been building toward this trip for weeks, and she had not been ready, and then one day she had been ready. The house was being managed by a property firm she had retained. They had kept it exactly as Vivian left it, per the specific instructions in the will. The garden trimmed, the floors clean, the kitchen stocked with the same simple things Vivian had always kept on hand. She parked in the gravel drive. She got James out of the car seat. She stood in front of the house for a moment. The brick was white. The climbing roses on the fence had been cut back for winter and were beginning their slow return. The front door was the same pale green it had always been. The paint slightly faded in the same places it had always been faded. She went inside. It smelled like Vivian, not a perfume, not a product. The particular smell of a house that has been loved in for a long time by someone with good taste and warm habits. Wood and books and something faintly like lavender. She carried James through the front hall to the back of the house. The back porch ran the full width of the building. It looked out over a sloping lawn, and then the water, the harbor flat and silver, in the late afternoon light. She sat in the old wicker chair. The cushion was faded blue. She had sat in this chair 100 times, beside Vivian, looking at this exact water. She settled James in her lap. He looked out at the water with his characteristic, wide-eyed concentration, as though he was already filing it away. "This is where your great-grandmother lived," she told him. "This is the house she built her life around. And someday, if you want it, it will be yours." He made his pleased sound. The sun was dropping. The harbor went from silver to gold. A boat moved slowly across the far edge of the view, its running light a small red point. She thought about Derek. Not with anger, not with grief, more the way you think about a scar that is healed cleanly. The tissue is different now. The skin remembers. But there is no pain. He had moved to another city. She knew this because his attorney had updated the address in the custody documents. He had exercised his visitation twice. The visits had been short and careful, and James had returned from both of them perfectly content, which was all she needed to know. She thought about Patricia. The emails had stopped. She had not responded to any of them, and eventually they had stopped. She wondered sometimes what Patricia told people about what had happened. She found, surprisingly, that she didn't wonder often. She thought about Sophia Reeves. They had had coffee twice since the hearing. Sophia had started a new job at a different firm. She seemed lighter than she had in that coffee shop the first time they met. They were not friends, exactly, but they were two people who had been caught in the same machine and had both chosen to step out of it rather than let it run. There were stranger things in the world. She thought about Renee, who had sent one more message 2 months ago, not asking for anything, not performing, just, "I'm in therapy. I'm working on understanding how I became someone who did what I did. I don't expect that to matter to you. I just wanted you to know." Claire had thought about it for a week. Then she had written back, "Thank you for telling me. I hope it helps." She had meant that too. She looked down at James. He had fallen asleep, which he sometimes did when the light was golden and the world was quiet. His hands were curled loosely at his sides. His face had the specific look of sleeping babies, which is the look of someone who is entirely and completely safe. She had given him that. this specific feeling of safety in the world. This was the first and most important thing she had ever done. She looked back at the water. She thought about who she was 6 months ago, sitting in a grocery store parking lot with the engine off, trying to organize the pieces of a life that had just broken into its true shape. She thought about who she was now, sitting on the porch of her grandmother's house in the company of the best thing she had ever made, watching the harbor go from gold to amber. She had not become someone different. This was the crucial thing she kept returning to. She had not been transformed into a new person by the money or the company or the legal battle. She had stopped being prevented from becoming the person she already was. That was the difference. That was the whole thing. The power had never been in the $4.3 billion. It had been in the decision to stop letting other people write the story of who she was. It had been in the moment she had sat in Gerald Harmon's office and asked the right questions instead of waiting to be told what to think. It had been in the midnight kitchen floor and the pasta with Margot and the board meeting and the quiet hours in Vivian's office, learning the language of something larger than herself. Derek and Patricia had thought they understood what she was. An asset to be managed, a variable to be timed. They had never understood that what made her valuable had nothing to do with the inheritance. The inheritance was just the evidence of what Vivian had already known. She was the thing worth leaving everything to. Not the money, not the company. Her, Claire. James stirred in her lap. She looked down. His eyes were open, finding her immediately, the way babies find their mothers, like they have a compass that points to exactly one direction. "Hello," she said. He made his sound. "I know," she said. "I'm here." The harbor was copper now, the sun at the very edge of the hills across the water. In 20 minutes it would be dark. She would need to go inside, make dinner, put James down in the crib she had brought, sleep in the room that had been hers every summer of her childhood. Tomorrow she would drive back to the city. She would go to the office. She would make decisions and ask questions and read reports and sit in meetings and learn, continuously, the language of this enormous thing her grandmother had left in her hands. But for now she sat in the wicker chair on the porch of the house in Newport with her son in her lap, and the harbor going copper and amber, and the particular smell of salt and roses in the evening air. She had not lost a marriage. She had walked out of a trap that had been built around her by people who understood her value better than she did at the time. She had walked out carrying her son and her clarity and the finely unobstructed version of herself. She had walked out and kept walking. And now here she was. Here she was. She closed her eyes for a moment. The wind came off the water, cool and steady. She heard the sound of the harbor, the low knock of boats at their moorings, the distant call of something overhead. The prison door, she thought, had been unlocked all along. She had simply finally understood that she was the only one who needed to walk through it. And she had. And she was free. Editorial disclaimer. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to bring meaningful stories and real lessons to our audience.